Hello, welcome. This is Jennifer McGuire, and today I have a shorter video for you sharing a technique that I like to do when I want to kind of step up a simple card design. This is a technique that you can do with any stamps and coordinating die sets you may have. I call this technique off-the-edge die cutting, and I have two examples for you. One has the die cutting at the bottom of the card, and the other has the die cutting hanging off the top of the card. Let's get started with this example first. For both of my cards, I'll be using the new STAMPtember collaboration set between Simon Says Stamp and Cleary Besotted. This is one of those sets that will sell out quickly and not be restocked. However, at the end of this video, I'll share some other product examples for you. I'm starting by creating a note card out of Brutus Monroe Not Your Mama's cardstock. The reason I chose this cardstock is that it's the heaviest cardstock I have. It's very, very heavy. And that way I don't have to worry about my markers bleeding through. I'll be using alcohol markers, which tend to bleed through cardstock. And since I'm making a one-layer card, I wanted to make sure this was heavy enough that it wouldn't bleed through. However, you don't have to worry about that if you don't want to. So now I'm cutting this in half. So I scored at 4 1/4 inches. Now I'm cutting at 5 1/2 inches to create two cards. I'll use one of them on this card and one on my second card. Off screen, I stamped and die cut some images from that Cleary Besotted set. I'm not actually using these die cuts on this card. I'm just using them as quick placement so I can figure out how much spacing I need to do on my one-layer card. I can save these die cuts for the future. Once I kind of get my spacing where I want it, I will then come in with the coordinating dies and put them where those stamped images are. For my design, I want these images as close together as possible, but I do not want those dies to overlap. I want to run this through one time through my die cut machine, and if those dies are overlapping, it will damage the die. So instead, I'm just positioning them so they're up close to each other, but not overlapping. That's why you see me kind of maneuver them a little bit and get them in just the right spot. Once I'm happy with them and have them temporarily taped in place, we can do some partial die cutting. Partial die cutting sounds difficult, but it's something you can do with any die cut machine you may have. I will be demonstrating with the Platinum 6 die cut machine from Spellbinders. The trick is to set up your die cut machine as you normally do for die cutting, but have the top cutting plate only cover part of your dies. I'm going to do about halfway across, so notice that the top cutting plate is about halfway across those dies. Anything under that cutting plate will cut. Anything hanging out will not cut. If you have a different kind of die cut machine, you could instead have all of your plates line up, but only have half of your dies under it, the rest hang out. It doesn't matter as long as the pressure is only applied to about half of it. So there you can see only the bottom half of those dies cut. All right, so now we'll remove our dies, save those for later, and we need to just cut between those die cut areas. So I have my T-roller and I'm connecting the areas where the die cutting started and stopped. And I'm using a craft knife to cut between them. So notice I'm going from the edge to where the first die cutting started. Then I cut between where the one die cutting started and one stopped, and I'll do that between each area, and then over on the other edge of the card. I'll be honest, I am not great with a craft knife, but this is pretty easy to do. If I can do it, I can assure you, you can too. Using a straight edge or T-ruler is very helpful. All right, so now I can pull that portion away. Then I like to use a paper sanding block to kind of rub across that area we cut on the back side, and that will remove any of those rough areas that may not have cut very well. It gives it a nice smooth look. All right, so now we can add our stamping into this. So I'll place this into my MISTI stamping tool and line up the images that I originally had planned to be in each spot. It's very easy to do because we have that die cutting along the bottom. So we just line the stamp image in and then stamp it with black ink. I'm stamping all of these images with Gina K Black Obsidian dye ink. The reason I chose that ink is you can use any coloring medium with it. You could use colored pencils, alcohol markers, watercolor, anything you want, and it won't bleed. Now for the inside of the card, I have a scrap of blue cardstock, and I'm stamping this image that's included in that Clearly Besotted set. Now this image has a sun in it. I'm cutting the sun off of the stamp. The reason I'm doing that is I want to stamp this a few times along the bottom, and I don't want multiple suns. For this first one, I'm going to place the sun back in its spot, and I will stamp it this time, but the next time I will remove it. I'm stamping this with Gina K Sea Glass ink, and I'm stamping a few times. This is a lighter ink, but if I stamp it a few times, it shows up darker against this similar color of cardstock. Now I will remove the sun that I just cut out and use the rest of the image and line it up over to the left of what I've already stamped. And I will repeat the process. This will create a border, but will only have one little sun there. I trim that border down, and now I'm using Gina K Connect liquid adhesive, and I'm gluing it right to the inside bottom of our card. The nice thing about this is this border will show when the card is closed and opened. I will also add a gold glitter cardstock border right above that. I'll run my liquid adhesive right along that top edge, then take a thin strip of gold glitter cardstock and place it right into that glue. Then we can flip the card over and cut all the extra off. I also wanted a gold glitter cardstock border to show when the card is closed. So I'm opening up my card, and along this little bottom edge that we hand cut with the craft knife, I'll run some liquid adhesive. Then I have a wider gold cardstock strip, and I'm going to place that right into the glue. Then we'll close the card and wiggle that gold glitter cardstock until just a little bit of it is peeking out from our die cut and hand cut edge. I'll put a paperweight over it so it holds in place while it dries. By the way, this Share Handmade Kindness paperweight, I'll tell you about that in a future video. Stay tuned, I'm still working out the details, but anything heavy will work here. All right, now let's look at the completed card. I did add some gold glitter gems from Studio Katia to the center of each flower. Here you can see what the card looks like when it's closed, and then when you open it up, there's plenty of room to write a personal message. There you can see the gold glitter, the tone-on-tone stamping that we did on the bottom inside edge, and that fun partial die cut border. You could have just cut that edge straight across and glued the die cuts on, but there's something really nice about that partial die cutting. And a bonus, the card will stand up nicely on its own. All right, now let's do another example, similar design, but this time the die cutting is hanging off the top of the card. This one looks great on display. So I have a piece of cardstock here that is 5.5 inches by 4.25 inches. This is not a note card, just a piece of cardstock. I am taping my dies along the top edge of this piece of cardstock. And I'm doing the same kind of positioning that I did on my other card. Might as well do the same thing since I've already got it all figured out. Once I have the dies taped in place, we're going to do some partial die cutting. Now I'll place this under my top cutting plate, so only about half of the die is under the cutting plate. Even if your cutting plate has a beveled edge like mine does, it doesn't matter. It'll still work great for this technique. So I'll run that through my die cut machine. Anything between the cutting plates will cut. That bit hanging out on the right will not cut. So we get a great partial die cut edge. Now I was able to find my cutting mat this time. So instead of using a mouse pad, I used a cutting mat and my craft knife. I do like to use a T-roller to make sure that my cutting edge is straight across the card. Once again, I'm just cutting between the die cut areas, kind of connecting the partial die cutting that we've already done. Partial die cutting may seem a little intimidating at first, but once you've tried it once or twice, it's easy to do and it creates unique looks on your cards. All right, once I've cut through all of that, we can pop away that extra bit. Then I like to, again, flip it over and use a paper sander, which will just kind of smooth out any rough edges I may have from that hand cutting that I did. All right, now, as I did before, I will line up my stamp images with the partial die cutting that we did and stamp that with black ink. I'll do this for all 4 of our images and also stamp a sentiment. All of this is from that same Clearly Besotted STAMPtember set. Next, I have a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch white note card. Along the folded edge, I'm running a line of liquid adhesive and then placing a thin strip of gold glitter cardstock. I thought that would be a nice touch at the top of our card. I then will cut off the extra, and below that, I will glue our stamped and partial die cut piece. So I'm putting liquid adhesive down. I like to use liquid adhesive because I can wiggle the piece and get it just right before I let it dry. I'll place this right below that gold cardstock strip, and then we can cut that extra off the bottom. By cutting the extra off the bottom, this card will still fit into a regular A2 envelope. So the overall size of this now is still 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inches. So here are our two different card variations. The one on the left has the off the edge die cutting on the bottom. This one has the off the edge die cutting at the top. I feel like these off the edge partial die cutting techniques add a lot of interest to these simple card designs. And it's something that you can do with pretty much any stamp and coordinating die that you may have. Now, I've done videos on these techniques in the past, and I'll link to a couple other here at the end of this video if you're looking for more inspiration. Before we go, I just thought I'd show you a few of my favorite stamp sets from Clearly Besotted. A lot of these would work for today's technique. Clearly Besotted has always been one of my favorite stamp companies. They're a small business out of UK, and I like that they have fine line illustrations that work well with each other. Most of their images have a more playful look, but they do have some with a more elegant look. They always have great sentiments too, as you can see in this set here. Some of their stamp sets have great background scenes, so you can stamp and die cut little critters and then place them on top of one of those scenes. They also have some smaller stamp sets that have a nice price point to them, such as this one here. This next one has been one of my favorites of all time. You can see I've used it quite a bit. You can have these little critters writing different messages on your card. I made a bunch for nurses when COVID started using this set. I also think this next set would work really well for the off-the-edge die cutting like we did on this piece here. You could have all those critters lined up along the top edge of a card. Clearly Besotted also has a lot of great sentiment sets like the one you see here. And please know, I don't work for Clearly Besotted. They didn't ask me to do this. I just really like their designs, and I think some stampers don't know about them, so I thought I'd share some here. This is one of my all-time favorite Clearly Besotted sets. I love this floral image. Really easy to color, and you can even stamp a sentiment at the center of the flowers. Here's another example of a good sentiment set and a backdrop stamp. I also wanted to mention that the owners of Clearly Besotted have incredible coloring skills, and they're great with masking techniques. So I will provide a link below to their Instagram account so that you can check out a lot of the examples they've done. They are very impressive. All right, there you have it. A really quick video for me, actually, and ways to use a bit of partial die cutting for off-the-edge cards. If you are interested in the products I use, they are linked below in my YouTube description. You can also go to my blog for much more information. And here at the end, I'll have a couple other off-the-edge die cutting videos that hopefully will give you some more inspiration. Thanks for watching. Have a wonderful day. See you soon.